My name is Naresh Sonchatla. I'm a British Indian, born in East Africa, Kenya in 1947. Life in Kenya, as far as I remember, I was born in a town called Kisumu, and as I was growing up, it was typical childhood. Most of us never had any shoes or anything like that, wandering around the town. But eventually joined a primary school in the town, completed my what they called KPE, was the Kenya Standard of Education. And then at the age of about 11, I entered a high school, what they call Kisumu High School, and I studied there up to the level of what we know as GCSE levels. The situation with us was we were a middle class family, not too rich, not too poor, but there was 8 of us, 4 brothers, 4 sisters. Mom and dad made a total of 10 people, and my father was the only bread earner. So it wasn't a very luxurious life by any means, but we grew up okay, one way or the other. Well, at a very young age, I don't think any kid has a dream as such, but because you have your parents to feed you. But as you're growing older and you see the world around you, and you realize one day you'll be out in the open world and try to earn a living for yourself. So, because I was fairly good at maths in the school, my aim was to be an accountant. So, having completed my GCSE, I went for a few interviews in the town, and eventually I got a job as a junior bookkeeper in one of the insurance companies. I worked there for about a year and a half, and in them days the custom was I never saw a pay packet, because every time the payday came, my father was at the office and he would pick up my wages from my boss. So I then felt it was one of the ways just to help the family, and I was quite happy doing bookkeeping. But deep down, I kept looking at the senior accountant in our office, and I thought I wanted to be like him, the senior authority to certify the accounts. But that dream just remained a dream. My boss, who I worked for, he was a very educated guy. He had obtained all his education in UK, and now and then we would chat about education system in UK, and I felt that England perhaps was a better place to get proper qualification and get proper degrees if I needed it, because Kenyan education was stretched to a certain limit because the British were still ruling there, and I don't suppose they wanted too many of us, when I call it us, the non-English people, to be too qualified in any field. So the restrictions were there, but they were all hidden restrictions. And my boss, who apparently was an Indian as well, he said, Naresh, if you really want to pursue your education, England is your best bet. So that's why I came to England, hoping to go to evening classes or colleges, and eventually wanted to go into a uni. But those were the dreams, because when I arrived in UK, I realized that earning bread as a wage and going to the evening classes was too difficult for a young boy like me, because I was miles and miles away from my family. I had nobody to express what I was going through, what I was feeling, and life really became very isolated at times. But eventually, like anywhere else, you make new friends, you get to know more people, and the life took off from there. Initially, when I got off the plane, I was having one thought only, that I hope there is somebody outside to receive me, because I am now in a totally strange place. And I had arranged with my sister and my brother-in-law, who were already in UK, to pick me up from the airport. But I was been told funny stories that your friends and relations sometimes turn their backs on you, things like that. And I was really scared to come out of the airport in case there was nobody to meet me there. The other thing I was told, that before I come out of the airport, I was only carrying Kenya currency in my pocket. And I was told to make sure that I change that currency into an English currency before I go out. Now, arriving from Kenya, my dad had given me 100 shillings. Now, 100 shillings was a lot of money for our family back in Kenya, because the bookkeeping job that I was doing in Kenya was only paying me 300 shillings a month. And that was still considered not a bad wage for a young kid. So when I came out at the airport, I saw the cashier desk and I gave him 100 shillings, which I thought was a lot of money. And I said, "Can I please have English money?" And he just chucked one note back at me. And I'm still waiting and waiting to see more money coming out. But he said, "That's it, sir." And I realized that was a £5 note. So basically, I started my life in England with £5. And when I got out of the airport, there were some flakes coming down, and I had never seen snow in my life. And I'm wondering, what the hell is this? Sorry, pardon my language. But I said, "What is this?" But by that time, I met my sister and my brother-in-law and said, "By the way, Naresh, this is snow, which you will see lots of in your stay in England." Which, of course, I did, lots of snow in my life. But that's how I was picked up from the airport. I came to Southampton, and I realized that my sister and my brother-in-law, with their 3 kids, were living in a 2-bedroom flat. And they said to me I could stay with them for a while till I get myself sorted out. And within a couple of weeks, I realized I was becoming a bit of a burden to them, though they never said that in words, but I could see the inconvenience. And very soon, I asked my brother-in-law if he could find me a room for myself rather than sharing it with the kids. But right across the road, there was another Indian guy. He had a big house. And in his house, I rented one room at the rent of £1 a week. But that meant that when I came home to my sisters, she would give me one meal. You have your one meal and you go back to your little room. There was no mobile phones, no televisions, nothing else. You just sit in your room and think hard as to what's going to happen next. And that's how the life began. Yes, as I said, I wanted to be an accountant. So the first thought came in my mind, having spoken to a couple of guys in and around me as to where do I start. They said there was a college in Southampton that did evening classes. And I inquired about it. The classes were like 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. and you had to pay something like £5 a week. And I'm working out all the figures in my mind as to how do I do it. Now I'll tell you, after a couple of weeks or 3 weeks, I realized I needed to find a job because the £5 I came with wasn't going to take me very far. So I started asking around, looking in the local newspapers for a bookkeeper's vacancy. And I must have given at least 6 to 7 interviews that I can remember of, which were all turned down by the company saying I wasn't good enough. or not good enough. Their main excuse or the reason then was to say, look, you don't have enough experience of this kind of job in this country, and therefore we cannot take a chance. So finally, I thought, right, I'll give it one more chance, and I was called for an interview in a company in Southampton. They kept me there for 4 hours, I believe, and different people interviewed me at least 5 to 6 times. And they said, right, you go and wait outside, we'll let you know. So when they called me in the office, they said, Naresh, we are very good at this job, but, and as soon as they used the word but, I realized this was again a waste of time. So I started walking out of the office and they said, where are you going? I said, I know what's coming next. I've heard it so many times. He just said, it's just that you haven't got any experience. So I argued back a little. I conjured up some courage, because them days for a young Indian guy to speak to 3 or 4 English people sat there was a big thing. And I said, look, I understand I don't have experience, but unless a company like yours would give me a start, I'm never going to get experience of this job. Oh, and besides, I said, if you're going to turn me down, at least tell me, where did I go wrong in my interview? Where did I go wrong in all these tests that you gave me? And the guy I was talking to, he said, look, the problem is you didn't go wrong at all. You did excellently well. The only reason we are not offering you a job is for the lack of experience. I said, oh, well, it seems that I'm going to be stuck with this excuse all my life. So they had a little chat between themselves quickly within 2 minutes, and they said, look, all right, we changed your mind. You can start on Monday. And my first question to them was not to ask them what job do I do or what not. I said, how much would I get paid? They said it'd be £7, 2 shilling and 6 pence, old currency. And I thought, well, that's good. £7. I converted quickly in my brain into the English money, Kenyan money, where I came from, and it sounded like lots of shillings. I said, wow, this is good. So I said, okay, I'll see you Monday. And I went home. I think this was a Thursday. When I say home, I went back to my sisters and my brother-in-law, and I gave them the good news that I've got a job. And my brother-in-law said, what job is it? I don't think he actually asked me what job it is. The important question was, how much money are they going to give you? I said, it's a junior bookkeeper's role with a company called McFisheries in Southampton, and they're going to give me £7, 2 shilling and 6 pence a week. And my brother-in-law looked at me and he says, is that it? Because my brother-in-law, I was more educated than my brother-in-law. And my brother-in-law said, I am not as educated as you, and I earn more than you. And I said, how come? He said, I am a bus conductor, and I earn £10 a week. And you call yourself an educated guy. At that minute, I thought, because I keep repeating this, money was the ultimate importance. Every extra penny would count for my living in this country. So I straight away asked my brother-in-law, I said, is there any chance of me getting a job where you are as a bus conductor? And he said, you don't want to do that job, you are an educated man. I said, well, it seems in this country there's more money in doing a non-educated job than an educated job. He said, that's true. So he said, well, if you want to become a bus conductor, come with me tomorrow morning. So he took me to his depot where he worked, and he said, this is the office, go and ask there. I asked for them for a job, and they were looking for people, so many, and they said, yeah, we want people. So you can start Monday, get your training at £10 a week. I said, well, this is more money. So I dumped the idea of becoming a bookkeeper, and I became a bus conductor. After a few weeks of doing bus conducting, there was a system whereby there were rotas. You only work with one driver all the time. So one conductor, one driver doing the same route all week long together. So me and this driver were doing the same route in the buses, driving along. I was collecting fares at the back and going home, different shift, long hours and all that. And one Friday morning, we got paid. I picked up my pay packet from the office and I went to the canteen where the guy who was driving the bus with me was sat next to me. So we had a cup of tea. And just being curious, this guy, the driver, had left his pay packet on the table and he was drinking his tea. And I glanced at his pay packet and he was getting £12 pay, £2 more than me. So I said to him, I said, how come we both start at the same time, we both finish at the same time, we both do the same routes and everything. So how come you get £2 more than me? He said, because I'm a driver, I'm a more responsible person in this job. So I went into the office, I said, can I become a driver, please? And then they started training me how to become a driver. I could drive a bit, but driving a big bus was a bit different. But I managed within 3 to 4 months. I passed my test and I became a bus driver. Excuse me. And I started earning £12 a week that way. Then came the turn, because £12 a week, I was a young boy of 18 years old, managed to meet a girl and became friendly. So going out, going to the movies, I didn't think we were going to discos and them things didn't come. Just going to a movie was a date, but it cost money. And I thought, this is an expensive hobby here. But it happened. I became a typical teenager. I looked around. By that time I was getting used to England. I was getting used to the snow. And I saw most kids my age were having long hair, mustache. So I started growing long hair, mustache and all that. And I think I became a proper, I started smoking. And then the friends that I met, they said, what do you do in the evening? I said, I go home and rest or read a book. I said, what do you do? He said, we go to pub and we have a drink. So I started going to the pub with them, having a drink and wasting more money instead of saving it. And I just became very careless with my life. I was being stupid, and I realized that pretty quick. My brother-in-law and my sister kept telling me off. They said, look, your family back home needs some help from you, financial help. They are expecting you to send some money home. So turned around a bit, and years went by. I was still driving the buses. And then I heard that my mom and dad and my rest of the family from Kenya, the life was becoming a bit difficult there and a bit risky, because Kenya had become independent, and the family had decided to come to UK. So before I knew, 4 years had gone by. I hadn't saved any money. When I say any money, in 4 years I think I had saved about £200 or something like that. And before I could blink an eye, 1970, all my family arrived in UK. Mom, dad, brothers, sisters, and everybody. My dad thought that I had been in England for 4 years. I had become a millionaire, he thought. And he said to me, I hope you've got a big house for all of us. So I told him, I said, I haven't got a house of my own, that's impractical, but I will rent a house by the time you came here. So when they arrived here, and I'm cutting the story short, they arrived here, we rented a big house, we all lived together. Very soon, all my brothers and sisters found a job, my dad found a job, and it was a family life. and everybody's pay packet every Friday had to be handed it to my dad. Dad was the chief cashier, and he would give us all pocket money to manage. So that way, I think financial situation got better and better and better, and came to a time where I saw a house for sale, and I inquired about it. It was £18,000 for a 4-bedroom house. I realized then it was in a rundown area of Southampton, but it was still a big house. So them days you could get a loan from the local council rather than the bank. Local council loans were cheaper than the bank loans. So we got a loan from local council and bought this house in Oxford Avenue, Southampton. And we started living as a family. So life was a bit better then, and my dad started nagging me about getting married. It's one of those Indian customs that you don't choose your own wife, your parents choose them for you, or that used to be the custom, not anymore now. I think I was one of the first one to break that trend, and I said to my dad, don't bother fixing me with any girls because I've already got an Indian girlfriend and I want to marry her. It was a bit of a shock to the system for a young boy telling his dad that he had found his own wife to be. But after lots of arguments and what have you, they all agreed. And so I married my wife, Hansa, who is still my wife, 50 years on. We have 3 kids, 2 daughters and 1 son. They're all married and they're all left home. But going back to the earlier life, when the financial situation came a bit better and my family had arrived, I thought about going back to accountancy, doing some clerical job rather than driving buses. I had done few factory jobs by then. And deep down I'm thinking, no, this is not what I really want to do. I want to have a decent clerical job at least. So eventually I found a job as a bonus clerk in one of the companies. And there was a senior clerk than me telling me what to do, how to do the job, what not. And I did that job for about 2 years. And I heard that the senior clerk was leaving the company and there was a vacancy advertised for a senior clerk. I didn't think I needed to apply for it. I thought it would be very obvious. They would put me into a job as a senior clerk and get somebody to do my job. But what I realized was they had employed somebody to become my senior, a new man becoming my boss. So I went to the senior manager and I said, this is not fair. I've been a junior clerk here for 2 years. My senior has just left. And isn't it automatic that I should be promoted to the job? They gave me some silly excuse and I realized then, first time, what racism was. They didn't tell me directly, but they said, we find you too good doing what job you're doing. We don't want to risk you moving from there, blah, blah. So I just handed in my resignation and I left the job. I came home and told the family that I left the job. People were worried about the financial situation again, but I said to myself, don't worry, I will find something. Come few more months as went by, there was a chain of supermarkets in Southampton. There still is, I think. They were advertising for a branch manager in one of their convenience stores. Now, I didn't have any experience in convenience stores or anything like that, but I remember my elder brother and my dad back home, they were working in the shops, so I knew somehow a little bit about shops. I was granted an interview, and I told them the fact that I haven't got any experience of running a convenience store in England, but my family has always been in a business of selling and buying things. For my good fortune, they offered me a job, and I became a branch manager at one of these companies. They had chains of shops all over the corners, all over the place in south of England. Moving further, there was once a branch manager's meeting at head office. So I obviously went to one of these meetings, and the managing director there gave all his briefing, and he said out of the 19 or 21 stores they had, 3 of those branches were not doing financially well for the company, and they had decided to dispose of those branches. So I heard all that, and when the meeting was over, I conjured up enough courage to speak to my director, and I said, "Can I buy one of the branches that you're deciding to close off?" Conversation took place, meetings took place, and I ended up buying one of those convenience stores. And that became my livelihood. I became known as owner of the first Indian in this town, perhaps, owning a convenience store. By this time, I think we are now into 1971 or something, and there was a small Indian community in town, and there were people like my dad and so many other elderly people. They used to meet at each house, like one week would be our house one Sunday, next Sunday would be somebody else's house, and so on and so forth. And every Sunday afternoon, the elderly people used to get together, and they used to recite religious hymns and kirtans and what have you. And that was for them, it was their social afternoon, once a week, elderly people. But my dad knew I could play Indian drum. And Dad said to me one day, he said, "Son, when we get together, we sing Indian religious songs, etc., this and that. Would you mind joining us and play the drums for us?" So I joined them, and that became my start towards the building of the Hindu temple. Because what happened was, instead of going to each other's house every Sunday, I had contacted the education department of Southampton and see if they could allow us to use one of their school annexes every Sunday afternoon. And they were kind enough to let us have one of the school annexes, and they said we don't have to pay for the caretaker or anything as long as we clean the place up. So every Sunday afternoon we used to go to the school annex, and because it was a bigger place, we could invite more and more Hindus to come along. And it went by like that for a few months. And then the education department said, "Well, that was a favor to you. We can't keep giving you all this free of charge." By that time, I had got to know a few fathers and padris and all that in the churches of England. So I asked them if they had any place, any rundown church they don't want, or any place. So Church of England allowed us to use part of a church in northern Southampton. So we moved there, and there we started meeting regularly every day, every evening, because it was there for us all the time. And that's where the thought of having a Hindu temple in Southampton was born. Because by that time, senior people, unfortunately, I think there's only one left now of them, we used to say, "Let's do something about it." And we used to have meetings and meetings after it. I understand you got Vinod Chopra after me. His dad was one of the senior person there as well. So we used to have meetings, but the problem we were having is, apart from one or two, all these elderly people, none of them were educated, none of them could speak English fluently, or none of them knew the laws of this country, how to go about, what to do. So it was landed into, there was one guy who could speak well English and he had experience of lots of things. And then migrants here got dropped into it. They said, you become, and they formed a committee, management committee as they called it. So I became the first assistant secretary to this group of people. And the other people were just good at singing hymns and kirtans and all that. How to go about doing things was left to me and a couple of others. So, cut the story short, we eventually contacted the local council and said, look, our aim, our wish is to build a place or have a place that we could call our temple. They suggested few rundown buildings, or they suggested we do what the Sikh community had done, had bought a church. Church they turned into a gurudwara. And they said, why don't you do that? We discussed it among our community, and people were adamant that no, we want a temple, not an ex-church or not an ex-mosque. We want a Hindu temple. Time moved on, and there was a place in Southampton in northern area, which was a long stretch of land, and it was turned into an unofficial dumping place for people to dump their rubbish. Piling up, tons and tons of rubbish was piling around there. If you drove past it, you could smell. So eventually I was asked to approach the local council with the aim of purchasing that land. Because this was a few years on, we had some money. And we approached the local council, said, look, if you give us this land, we will turn it into such a monumental place that what we want to build here will become not only a tourist attraction, but it will become one of the smartest building in the city of Southampton. Cut the story short, they agreed to it, they gave us the land, and then a massive fundraising project started. We applied for the council grant, they gave us some grant, then we contacted the MPs, they took us to the parliament and met the environment secretary. The national government gave us some grant, and then we contacted national lottery people, got some grant from there, and then we advertised in every Indian newspaper around the world. First we made a contact with one Indian newspaper in London that was printing Hindu Indian papers for England only. But he gave us the press contacts, the editors' contacts in Australia, America, wherever. So we just wrote to them hoping for the best, and they advertised our wish to build a Hindu temple in Southampton. And Hindus all over the world, we were surprised how much funds started coming in. So there you go, the fund was enough eventually, and we gave a contract to the builders to build the first Hindu temple in south of England. I would advise young kids nowadays that if possible at all, don't give up your dream. Keep pursuing it, because life nowadays is not as difficult as it was before. Before, the racism was the biggest problem we had. I remember, I must mention this because I remember when I first came here and I was looking for a room for myself in the street where I was walking up and down. I saw big houses owned by white people, and they were advertising room to let on their windows. But then it says, no blacks, no dogs. It was really fierce racism there. So difficult times have passed, in my opinion now, because the communities are now more integrated. They are acceptable now by every community. The job chances are better with a bit of education. So pursue your dreams and stick to it. Don't give up. Well, I see myself as a British Indian for two reasons. I'm Indian because I was born Indian. I have Indian blood in me. I'm married to an Indian girl. My children are grown up with Indian beliefs. And I still respect my religion, I respect my community, I still respect India as my country in a way, though I am British. But at the same time, I say I'm British because it's this country, Britain, that has given me a chance to be what I am now. I am financially secured. I have got a family that's got lovely education now. So this country has given me a lot more than what I would have probably gained back in Kenya or back in India. So I respect this country very much. I feel I have emptied myself with lots of my feelings that I was hiding within myself, though I have given such interviews before. But this seem to me a kind of interview where I can really open up and tell you the real facts, rather than bending about the bush. If the younger generation of today's British Indians, when they see this interview, they will learn that they are not on their own. Even British Indians today, younger generation, including my children I know of, do face some kind of racism somewhere along the line, though not so openly, whereby when we were told no blacks and no dogs, they say to me, my son says to me certain times that sometimes, somewhere they feel they've been discriminated against. But my advice to them is now, it's a very open country, and if you got qualifications and education, you will do well. So keep pushing, and don't give up. My advice to the younger generation would be just that. Well, I hope you make it available to as many British Indians as possible, and even the host community. So the younger generation of the host community would realize what the life was all about 50 years ago and what it is now. Because nowadays when I see my daughter, my son, they've got English friends, they do English things, they go to parties, they go this, that. I mean, they do so many English things that I had never heard of. Giving you example of these baby showers and pre-wedding parties, and I'd never heard of that. I just got married. I told my father I'm marrying this girl. They fixed it. Go get married. Done. Nothing else. No fuss. But now, all the things that younger generation is doing, that's very much an English traditional way of doing things. And fine, if they love doing it, as long as they don't abuse anybody, they don't harm anybody, and they enjoy it, it's okay with me. I think I've sacrificed my ambition to be an accountant. I believe I've sacrificed growing up the way most youth would grow up, because at a very young age I was made responsible for a family responsibility. Apart from my father earning money, I was the next in line to make sure that all my younger brothers and sisters, and everything about England, my dad couldn't speak a word of English, so everything about England I had to do for my family. I had to make sure my younger brothers and sisters went to school, admission in schools, finding them jobs. I feel, yes, I have sacrificed my youth. But having said that, I have no regrets.